One night in the Persian Gulf, something unexpected happened. It was quiet, no gunfire or sirens. But above the sea, there was a very important event that most people didn't notice. On January 27, 2026, Iran launched drones. These drones are called Shadow 3 drones, and they are owned by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Their goal was simple: to show strength and send a warning to the United States. But Iran did not expect that they would encounter someone. In the skies above the Strait of Hormuz, the United States Navy's MQ-4C Triton was there. It's a massive surveillance drone used by America to monitor vast areas of sea and sky. Here it is. As Iranian and American drones approach, there's no exchange of bullets or gunfire. Instead, it signals. This is called electronic warfare. It means a battle of radars, sensors, and electronic systems, right? While the silent battle is happening in the skies, something even more shocking happened on the ground in Iran. Just a few kilometers from Tehran, a powerful explosion occurred at the Parchin military complex. This is a secret facility of Iran that has long been linked to military testing and nuclear-related activities. It's not just a simple base, it's a place that's important to Iran's most sensitive projects. Everything became even more serious because the explosion happened at a time when the Iranian regime claimed it could acquire a nuclear weapon in just 24 hours. That's why, for many countries, this wasn't just an accident. The news about the explosion didn't just spread throughout the Middle East. Instead, it even reached Moscow and Beijing, because any problem in a nuclear facility has an effect on the whole world. The Iranian armed forces confirmed that an explosion did occur, but after that, the officials of the regime became silent. There is no clear explanation as to what caused it or how extensive the damage is. Meanwhile, the intense pressure from the United States continues. Washington has given an ultimatum with no conditions, and while Tehran remains silent, a new threat is now weighing on their minds. And this is the shadow of the B-2 bombers, America's stealth aircraft that can strike without being immediately detected by radar. There are reports that these could come from Diego Garcia, a strategic United States base in the Indian Ocean. At this point, it's clear that this is no longer a matter of diplomacy, no longer an exchange of words. What is happening now seems like a gradual examination within a system that has ruled for 47 years, a theocracy that is now under intense pressure. To better understand the whole situation, we need to look at everything that's happening, from the sea to the land. Let's go back to the Strait of Hormuz. The mission of the MQ-4C Triton isn't just simple surveillance. It's a flying command center. It has a 360-degree electronic scanning system that can detect enemy radars, disrupt their signals, and send images and information to other American weapons. In other words, it can blind the enemy's defenses. Iran's Shadow 3 drone, however, believed the MQ-4C Triton was just monitoring the United States fleet near Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. But it didn't know that it was slowly entering a much larger American electronic system, like a fish caught in a net. It doesn't get caught right away, but there's no escape. This is the new kind of warfare. No gunshots to be heard, no explosions caught on camera. But there are systems being quietly shut down, defenses that no longer work, and countries suddenly losing control. And on that night in the Persian Gulf, one thing was clear. Something had changed in the way wars are fought. The important point here is this. When the two systems came close, the American drone and the Iranian drone, and they entered each other's signal range, they had reached the final stage before real war. When both sides are already exchanging signals and their electronic systems start to interfere with each other, it means they are just one step away from a kinetic conflict, the kind of war with real bullets and bombs. The United States Central Command, or United States Central Command, used this encounter not just for surveillance. They did something even more important. They tested how fast and how Iran's air defense would respond. They observed which radars were active, which ones were weak, and which ones were easy to disrupt. All that information is used to update America's target database, a list of exact targets in case they need to carry out a first strike. The Iranian regime thinks that flying their UAVs is a show of strength. For them, it's a message of intimidation. But in reality, they themselves provided very important information to America. While their drones were flying, the American electronic warfare systems recorded the frequency maps, as well as the command and control signals used by Iran. In other words, they gave away how they communicate, how they give orders, and how they control things, as if everything was served on a silver platter. This is how a hunter moves. First, they sniff out the victim, observe their movements, look for weaknesses, and only attack when they're sure. And that's exactly what's happening now in the Persian Gulf. But while the tension in the air is quiet and silent, there's an event that's the complete opposite. Something exploded on the ground, literally. While the commanders of the Revolutionary Guard are boasting that it's only a matter of time before they can make a nuclear weapon, reports of explosions at the Parchin military complex in southeast Tehran have been coming in one after another. The Iranian armed forces tried to make it appear that this was just a routine defense system test. They downplayed what was happening, but that didn't match the evidence. The leaked videos from the area and satellite data clearly show that this was not a controlled test. This was a serious, unexpected explosion. It's important to realize that Parchin isn't just a typical military camp. For many years, the International Atomic Energy Agency has suspected it as a place where nuclear trigger tests might be conducted, tests connected to the development of nuclear weapons. This is one of the most secretive places. And because of that, it's very hard to believe that the timing of the explosion was just a coincidence. Think about it. The regime's strongest card, their nuclear program, exploded from within, exactly at the time when they were about to use it to threaten the world. Because of this, there are two possible explanations. First, it could be that Israeli and United States intelligence have deeply infiltrated the regime. It's possible that they carried out a Stuxnet 2.0 type of operation, a quiet yet highly effective mix of cyber and physical sabotage. Second, it's also possible that the nuclear devices Iran is rushing to build exploded due to lack of technology and intense pressure. This means their capability is not yet ready, but they force themselves to rush. Whatever the truth is, both outcomes are bad for Tehran. If this is sabotage, it means the most secret part of the regime has been breached. If this is an accident, it's clear that their nuclear capability is just for show on paper, not a real threat. While smoke is still rising from Parchin, there's another clear sign that this is not an isolated incident. Across the region, United States Air Force C-5 Super Galaxy transport planes are repeatedly landing and taking off. These planes are not just for transporting soldiers. They are carrying Patriot and TAD missile defense systems, weapons used as shields against missiles. This shows that the United States is not just preparing to attack, but is even more prepared to defend in case Iran launches a desperate retaliatory attack. It's now clear what Washington is doing. They are waiting for a response from Tehran, and at the same time they are challenging them, silent in words, but ready for anything that might happen. Despite this, if the Iranian regime accepts that the explosion was an external attack, there will only be one outcome. They will be forced to go to war, but if they don't accept it and say it was nothing, they will face another problem. They will appear weak and incapable in front of their own people. This means that whatever they choose, they lose. The leadership of Iran is now trapped by their own propaganda. For a long time, they have shown the public that they are strong and unshakable. Now they no longer have a safe explanation that won't damage their image. The explosion's impact was felt in politics and directly affected the country's economy. The military explosion's shockwave created a tsunami-like impact on the struggling economy. At the same time, A sensitive news report came out from Washington. There was a plan to bring Iran's oil exports down to zero. This was immediately felt in the Tehran stock market and in the currency market. The Iranian rial suddenly plummeted drastically. It reached the darkest point in its history. In the black market, the exchange rate soared to almost 1.5 million rials for one United States dollar. This is not just a number. This means that people's savings lost their value, their ability to buy food collapsed, and it was as if the future of ordinary citizens was erased. If before the exchange rate was only at 80,000 rials, and it reached this level in such a short time, this is no longer just a simple economic crisis. This is already a total system collapse. And what was the regime's response? They printed more money. Instead of stopping the problem, they poured gasoline on the fire. The central bank released even more almost worthless reals, supposedly to fight inflation. But in reality, the situation just got worse. According to official data, inflation is at 60%. But on the streets, the real inflation has reportedly gone over 300%. Food prices change by the hour. Basic necessities are almost out of reach for the average person. Long lines can be seen in front of banks. Many ATMs are empty. The credit system has almost frozen. When the flow of money stops, it means the heartbeat of money has stopped. And when a state can no longer be paid for by its own citizens, it clearly means the state is bankrupt. The United States' strategy isn't just about money. Their real target is oil, the only source of oxygen for the regime of Iran. The main targets of the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, from Diego Garcia, and the F-35s coming from the United States ship Abraham Lincoln, are Iran's oil export terminals at Karg Island and Bandar Abbas. If Iran's daily oil exports, which are at 2 million barrels, are cut off, it won't just be Tehran that will be affected. This will also directly affect China, the largest buyer of Iran's oil. If China loses its cheap energy supply, the costs of their factories will increase. And when production costs rise, the entire global supply will be affected. This means it's not just the Middle East that will be shaken, but the whole world. What is happening now is economic strangulation, a form of isolation that is even worse than the old sanctions before. In this situation, the previous oil for food periods would seem lighter in comparison. Imagine this scenario. The regime can no longer sell oil. Even if they manage to sell, they can't collect the payment, and their cash reserves have become worthless paper. In this situation, they can no longer fund their army, police, or even their most loyal militias. When the flow of money from Tehran stops, the so-called axis of resistance, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen, will gradually dissolve due to local problems and lack of funding. No bullets need to be fired, no war needs to be declared. When the money is gone, the entire structure will collapse on its own. When the money runs out, ideology can no longer fill people's stomachs. At this point, even the generals of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard will be forced to choose. Will they choose loyalty to the leader, or will they choose the instinct to survive, especially in a system that can no longer pay even its own officials? When they are no longer being paid, everything changes. The halt of Iran's oil exports is not just Tehran's problem. It's a nightmare for Russia, too. Moscow relies on Iran for the supply of Shahed drones and ballistic missiles that it uses in the war in Ukraine. If Iran's economy collapses and its factories stop production, there will be a huge gap in the Russian army's ammunition supply, a gap that's hard to fill. The billions of dollars that Putin spent on nuclear and military cooperation with Iran will become meaningless in the midst of this economic collapse. With a single move, the United States hit two targets. It squeezes Iran while also undermining the strategic calculations of Moscow and Beijing. This is no longer just a simple regional embargo. This is now a global geoeconomic chess move. While external pressure keeps tightening, Iran's internal situation has long since collapsed. The regime's crisis now goes beyond street protests, reaching the top levels of the state. The announcement by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei that he has already appointed possible successors in case he dies is an unprecedented admission of weakness in the history of the theocracy. In a normal situation, the leadership of Iran always presents itself as eternal and unshakable. But now their actions seem to say, "After me, it's out of my hands." This announcement is a silent message within the system for the generals, officials, and oligarchs that it's time to jump from his sinking ship. The leader's open admission of his own demise and the weakness of the regime is a clear sign that the chain of loyalty has already been broken at the very top. At the same time, even the regime's former supporters in the West are withdrawing one by one. This shows that the ideological front has also collapsed. A clear example of this is the well-known musician Roger Williams. In an interview with Piers Morgan, he was forced to soften his long-standing anti-West and pro-regime position. His statement that he does not support the theocracy reflects a simple truth. Supporters leave when the ship is sinking. Because of this, the Iranian regime has lost its intellectual and cultural defenders in the West. In the eyes of the world, it no longer has any credible defense. Neither the Islamic world nor the Western left can defend it anymore. To stand behind a regime that hangs its own citizens from cranes while using nuclear blackmail against the world. Inside the country, repression has reached a brutal level. According to reports, the number of deaths in the 2026 protests has reached 6,126. But instead of frightening the people, it only fueled their anger. The wall of fear in the streets has been broken. People are no longer afraid. Imprisonment or death, because for them, they have no future left to lose. The regime's promise of security completely collapsed after the Parchin explosion and the simultaneous economic collapse. A state that cannot even feed its own people, a state that cannot protect them and repeatedly lies, has a mathematically zero chance of survival. At this point, what the Iranian people are asking for is no longer reform. What they are asking for now is regime change, and the price of that demand is blood. The fall or complete neutralization of Iran will not only change the Middle East, it will change the global balance of power from Ukraine to Taiwan. For Russia, the risk is enormous. It stands to lose its supply chain of UAVs and missiles that are crucial to its war in Ukraine. If Iran falls, Putin's southern front will collapse. The world has long known how dependent he is. Russia is dependent on Iran to fill the gaps in its own defense industry. If that lifeline is cut, the Ukrainian army's position on the battlefield will become stronger. That's why the explosion in Parchin wasn't just heard. It was even celebrated in Kiev. On the other hand, Moscow's silence speaks volumes. Putin is busy with his own crisis, and he can't risk saving Iran. The situation is more complicated for China, but it's just as dangerous. Iran is an important part of Beijing's Belt and Road project, and one of its most important energy suppliers. The United States blocking Iranian oil is like pouring sand into the engine of China's economy. But while Beijing is preoccupied with tensions in Taiwan and its own economic slowdown, it can't afford to enter a direct war against the United States just because of Iran. So Xi Jinping is forced to choose. Watch Iran slowly get strangled or risk his own economy. For now, he has chosen silence. This so-called Great Betrayal is the clear failure of the Iranian leadership's Lock East strategy. What's happening shows just how weak and fragile the so-called Russia-China-Iran alliance, often referred to as the axis of evil, really is. When interests clash, ideological alliances vanish. Iran will soon be isolated again. This should warn rogue states like North Korea. When your time comes, no one will help you. The pressure built by the United States doesn't just come from military strength. It also works by destroying and dividing alliances, divide and rule. In this game of global power, Iran has been chosen as the victim and is now approaching collapse. On President Trump's table, the military options are no longer limited to small and precise operations. The B-2 Spirit bombers deployed in the region, along with the weapons carried by the C-5 Galaxy aircraft, are equipped with bunker buster bombs. These are weapons designed to destroy Iran's underground facilities. This means everything is ready. This is no longer a threat. It's now a prepared plan. The message from the United States is very clear. Surrender, or we'll send you to the Stone Age. The Parchin explosion proves these aren't just words. This showed that even Iran's most fortified and most secret facilities can be reached when necessary. According to the Pentagon's plan, the first step is to blind Iran's entire system. Within 48 hours, they plan to destroy command centers, communication networks, and air defenses. When that happens, the Iranian military will lose its eyes, ears, and brain. The drone operations in the Strait of Hormuz served as the intelligence phase of this plan. That's where information was gathered. That's where the defenses were measured. That's where the next steps were prepared. Now begins the kinetic phase where real targets are struck. The Tomahawk missiles of the United States Navy and the Joint Standoff Strike missile munitions of the United States Air Force are now locked onto targets that will cut off the military backbone of Iran. This is not a plan for conquest. This is not an invasion. This is a decapitation strategy. The goal is to remove the people running the regime, not the country itself. Free the army from the orders of a few people and give the citizens a chance. At this point, the hourglass has run out of sand for the Iranian Islamic regime. The silent battle of drones over Hormuz and the explosion that shook the night in Parchin are clear signs of the end of a 47-year era. The regime is collapsing. The economy is down. Diplomacy is gone. No more friends. Military deterrence is no longer feared. The power they call the Great Satan is now right at their doorstep. Along with the largest fleet in history, inside the country the people are angry. Outside, the allies are silent, and the state treasury is empty. The end of this story will probably not be written at the negotiating table, but in the streets of Tehran. There are two possible endings. They will raise the flag of unconditional surrender and will ultimately end up in the trash bin of history. Or they will sink into the darkness of the ideology they believed in the very tunnels they themselves built. But one thing is certain. That night, it wasn't just a building that exploded in Parchin. What was truly destroyed was the regime's illusion that they were untouchable. Now that illusion is gone. All that's left is fear and the cold truth of the approaching end.